You used to think that being green was a luxury for your company, but climate change has made you realize that you can no longer ignore it. The buzz is about becoming carbon neutral, but where do you start? Consider your drivers. Do you want to become carbon neutral for marketing reasons, for financial reasons, or to help save the planet?
Training to become an actor is an intensive process that requires curiosity, courage, and commitment. You'll learn how to prepare for rehearsal, how to rehearse, and how to use independent and proactive processes to achieve your best work possible for stage and screen.
Once most animals reach adulthood, they stop growing. In contrast, even plants that are thousands of years old continue to grow new needles, add new wood, and produce cones and new flowers, almost as if parts of their bodies remained forever young. The secrets of plant growth are regions of tissue that can produce cells that later develop into specialized tissues.
The English Revolution has been interpreted in several ways by historians, as a fight between the aristocratic cavaliers, who were open to life, and the serious Puritans, as a battle for power between Parliament and the monarchy over the rights of Englishmen that had been going on for centuries, and as a class war similar to the French Revolution, of which it was a forerunner.
Perhaps the most measurable benefit of the program has been the opportunity to meet in small groups, something that is difficult to arrange in such a desperate organization. Many officers would have to work together for 30 years but would not know others' strengths and weaknesses. The purpose of the informative speech is to provide interesting, useful, and unique information to your audience. By dedicating yourself to the goals of providing information and appealing to your audience, you can take a positive step towards succeeding in your efforts as an informative speaker.
A supercomputer simulation by an international team of researchers has shown the formation of a rapidly growing star from supersonic gas streams in the early universe left over from the Big Bang. The star ends its life with catastrophic collapse to leave a black hole with a mass of 34,000 times that of the Sun. Elephant is the largest land-living mammal. Elephant is the largest land-living mammal.
In this library, reserved collection books can be borrowed for up to 3 hours. In this library, reserved collection books can be borrowed for up to 3 hours. I used to have coffee with milk and 1 sugar. I used to have coffee with milk and 1 sugar.
The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy. The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy.
Put the knife and fork next to the spoon near the edge of the table. Put the knife and fork next to the spoon near the edge of the table.
Meeting with mentors could be arranged for students who need additional help. Meeting with mentors could be arranged for students who need additional help.
I missed yesterday's lecture. Can I borrow your notes? I missed yesterday's lecture. Can I borrow your notes?
If you forgot your student number, you should contact Jenny Bryce. If you forgot your student number, you should contact Jenny Bryce.
The given diagram denotes the graduation laboratory in detail. The laboratory has a computer station, offices, storage facility and many more. If we enter from the west side of the building, then on the left side, there is a storage area, and the opposite side, there is an animal science and plant science area. Next to the toilets, there may be 3 offices which are open on the working hours of the laboratory. Overall, there is a computer station where students can have access to reference materials. This diagram clearly gives information about trading goods. It is generally true that this diagram is relatively complex, and it is made up of 5 stages. The whole process begins with cedar or timber and ends in linen tools, beer, weapon oils and so on. At the same time, the elements used during the whole process include copper, semi-precious stones, gold, ebony, ivory, slaves, exotic animals and so on. Overall, it is clear that this diagram is very beneficial and helps us to gain a better understanding of trading goods.
The graph gives information about Burnaby Public Library between 2011 and 2014. As can be seen from the graph, there were different trends for men and women. The number of books read by men increased steadily between 2011 and 2012, from about 3,000 to 4,000. After that, the number rose dramatically to 14,000 books in 2014. Overall, there was a strong upward trend in the number of books read by men. Although women read more books than men in 2011, their reading fell to below the level of men in 2014.
The bar charts illustrate the unemployment rate and average weekly earnings by education attainment in 2016. The workers who had a doctoral degree had the lowest unemployment rate of 1.6% as compared to workers who have less education than a high school diploma had the highest unemployment rate of 7.4%. The highest median usual weekly earnings were more than $1,500 for both doctoral degree and professional degree. Overall, the latter had the lowest median weekly earnings, $504, in 2016 among those at all education levels.
The given image represents the list of states with their income. There are 5 different states which include New Jersey, New York, Chicago, Vermont and Connecticut. According to the image, the highest income for the state of New Jersey, which has nearly $19,000. New York stood at the second position in income with $17,500. The third number of income goes to Chicago with approximately $15,000. Overall, the least number came for Connecticut, which has $12,000 income. Now the economists calculated, it's a back-of-the-envelope calculation, that removing all immigration controls would double the size of the world economy, and even a small relaxation of immigration controls would lead to disproportionately big gains. Now, from an ethical point of view, it's hard to argue against a policy that will do so much to help people that are much poorer than us. The famous RAND study reckons that a typical immigrant who arrives in the U.S. ends up with $20,000 a year. That's rough. It's not just the migrants themselves who gain, it's the countries they come from. Already, the migrants from poor countries working in rich countries send home around $200 billion a year, through formal channels, and about twice as that through informal channels. And that compares to the neat $100 million that Western governments give in aid. These remittances are not wasted on weapons or siphoned off into Swiss bank accounts, they go straight into the pockets of local people. They pay for food, clean water, and medicines, they help kids in school, they help start up a new business. The speaker was discussing the benefits of migration. First and foremost, he mentioned that removing all immigration controls would double the size of the world economy. In Annex, He talked about the migrants from poor countries working in rich countries send home around $200 billion a year, through formal channels, and about twice as that through informal channels. Overall, I would like to opine that this money goes to their pocket to improve their living standard.
There's sugar in a lot of foods where you don't expect it. Of course, there's lots of sugar in donuts of ice cream, or pastries, or other things that are sweet, candy of course, but there are other places where you see it and you don't necessarily expect it. So as an example, peanut butter. Here's a list of ingredients from Skippy peanut butter and you see that sugar is the second most common ingredient. So that you may know from the reading food labels that these ingredients and any food labels that are listed in order of how much there is in the food itself, so sugar comes right after peanuts. Here's another example, beef stew. You wouldn't necessarily expected to find sugar in beef stew but it's there. Now it's down the list of ingredients, it's actually toward the end, but if you look at the marketing of this and food at the can, it says, there are fresh potatoes and carrots. But actually there's more sugar in this than there are carrots. And, so you wouldn't eat something like beef stew and expect to find this to be the case. The lecturer was discussing the usage of sugar in foods. First and foremost, he mentioned that there are lots of sugar in sweet, such as donuts, ice cream, and pastries. In addition to this, he talked about peanut butter and you see that sugar is the second most common ingredient. Overall, you wouldn't necessarily expect to find sugar in beef stew, but it's there.
So, let me about the polar regions, just to clarify exactly what we mean. And we have first of all the Arctic at the top of the Earth and the Antarctic at the bottom, and so the Arctic was named after the Greek word for bear. Now surprisingly it's not after the polar bears that live in the Antarctic or live in the Arctic and based on it's after the Little and Great Bear constellations that can be seen in the sky. Now the Greeks also hypothesized that there would be the Anti-Arctic, which is how we get the name Antarctica, and of course it wasn't discovered until much later on. Now these regions are opposite in many ways other than just their names and their location on the globe, and so if we look at the Arctic first of all, and the Arctic is actually an ocean surrounded by land, and so you can see here this is the UK down here and this kind of Russia and then American Canada around here, and so there is a bit of land cover in our ice on the top in the Arctic, which is Greenland here and Marcy all this area here. Surprisingly a lot of people don't realize that this isn't actually land. The North Pole isn't on land. It's just one big ocean. The speaker was discussing the polar regions in detail. First of all, he mentioned that the Arctic at the top of the Earth and the Antarctic at the bottom. The Arctic was named after the Greek word for bear. Now the Greeks also hypothesized that there would be the Anti-Arctic, which is how we get the name Antarctica. Furthermore, the Arctic is actually ocean surrounded by land, and so there is a bit of land cover in our ice on the top in the Arctic. Overall, the North Pole isn't on land, it's just one big ocean. Which one is not mythological animal? Unicorn, giraffe, dragon or mermaid? Which one is not mythological animal? Unicorn, giraffe, dragon or mermaid?
What do bees collect from flowers? What do bees collect from flowers?
What do you call the strap that circulates a person in a car or an airplane? What do you call the strap that circulates a person in a car or an airplane?
What do we call a period of 1,000 years? What do we call a period of 1,000 years?
What do you call a list in front of a book which outlines the structure of a book? What do you call a list in front of a book which outlines the structure of a book?
What are the mountains that can erupt? What are the mountains that can erupt?
How would you describe the process in which ice becomes water? How would you describe the process in which ice becomes water?
What do we call the frozen water? What do we call the frozen water?
The name of the building where you can borrow books? The name of the building where you can borrow books?
What device is used to measure a 200-meter sprint? What device is used to measure a 200-meter sprint?
How do you call the seasonal flying from cold to warmer areas? Mitigation or migration? How do you call the seasonal flying from cold to warmer areas? Mitigation or migration?
How many days are there in February during a leap year? How many days?